Hey, what's up, guys? This is Jeremy Hauser, host of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. Excited to bring this conversation to you. I had it as I sat down with entrepreneurial advisor Larry Sprung. Has an incredible story. We talked everything from business planning to podcasting to also one of the particular moves he made in his business here over the last couple of years that just catapulted his career and his success of their firm as they continue to delegate and hire additional staff members. We talk a lot about staffing. And also, for those of you that are looking for new ways to get in front of your ideal client, Larry shares some incredible marketing ideas for you. So, hopefully, you tune in here. Have a good one. Let us know what you think. Take care and check out this episode. With Thanksgiving and holiday season upon us, there's a lot to be grateful for here in 2024. Welcome to this week's episode of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Hauser, and today we're going to bring some gratitude and joy to the podcast, along with some ideas to piggyback off our recent podcast episodes as we continue to do retirement planning and for business planning for 2025. My guest today is Larry Sprung. He is the founder of Mitlin Financial. Larry is an award-winning financial advisor and founding member of the Investopedia Advisor Council. How are we doing today, Larry?
I am great. Thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Thanks for joining today. I know before we dive in, unpack a lot about your story. One thing that I didn't know, so that was actually, I've seen some of your clips on LinkedIn and other things, but you and your wife, 1.7 million raised for the suicide prevention.
Yeah, it's been a lot to be thankful for sure.
Yeah. And also for the listener that maybe has not checked out Larry, his podcast. So he's done over 200 podcast episodes for his particular show. So we'll unpack a little bit more. But so those that don't know you, Larry, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So again, thanks for having me, Jeremy. First and foremost, I am a husband to my wife, Denise, of 24 years, and father to Jeremy, my youngest, and my oldest, Zach. And I just happen to be somebody who's an advisor and a founder in wealth management. And I enjoy a lot of time at hockey rinks, which many people who know me will find me there. Typically, when I'm not at the office, that's where I'm found because either I'm playing or one of my boys are playing or we're taking in a New York Ranger game.
Well, that did. So did you play through college?
I did. I went to Binghamton, played through college, and now my older son is playing in college, and my younger son is committed to Brown University and playing junior hockey currently.
Wow, very cool. Love the sports background. For those, so Mitlin Financial, I've heard a thing or two about the story here, but for the listeners, so tell us a little bit about your team at Mitlin Financial and y'all's 20-year story.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the most important piece is where we get the name from. Mitlin, is basically a mashup of MIT, my wife's grandfather Mitchell, and my mother's name Linda, Lin, and basically my those two people passed away literally within hours of each other, and then I met my wife, and we were reconciling where we were, and when we were deciding what to name the firm and we were looking at these two people, they had great values, always put family first, and that was the environment that we wanted to create with creating a firm. Was a family first environment where we put our family first, we put our stakeholders and our team families first, and then the families we serve also come first. So one of our core values is client equals family equals team. We're all in this together. So we really enjoy serving the families. We have a team currently of 6, which is made up of myself as the founder and lead advisor. My wife Denise is the director of marketing. We have our director of first impressions, Josh Rubel. We have an associate wealth advisor in Jarrell, relationship manager Carmen, and our administrative assistant Krista. And they're really the energy behind the engine, and I'm the face. So they're the ones that serve our families each and every day, making sure that they are working towards and accomplishing their goals and finding joy along the way doing it.
And as you started to scale. So obviously you and your wife started the business, and then and I think right 2004 is when y'all's company.
Correct. Yes, we just celebrated 20 years in business.
Huge milestone. So 2 decades. When did you start to add on to your staff, if you recall, and what was kind of the tipping point to start to add to the firm for more bodies?
Yeah, so we first added probably within the first couple of years, we added one support person, and in full disclosure, my wife was not part of the practice up until about 5 or 6 years ago, where she started doing some stuff for us part time, and then has been integrated as a full time member for the last 4 years.
Hmm.
And I think this is relevant because I had a very nice lifestyle practice for a very long time of that 20-year period, because my kids were young, and as I said, family came first, and I wanted to be there for their life events during when they were initially born. I used to take off Fridays during the summer, and
Hmm.
to this day we still have clients and families that think I'm off on Fridays during the summer, even though I haven't done that in a long time. But yeah, so we stayed kind of small intentionally so I could have the time to spend with the family. And then it was about 4 or 5 years ago when my youngest son, at the same time my older son was going to college, decided he was going to leave home and go to boarding school. And my wife and I were like, wow, we got a lot of time on our hands. And we
Hmm.
made a conscious decision to really grow the practice. And a lot of those team members have been added in the last 4 years or so as we've decided to scale the practice. And we've grown exponentially, not only in team, but the families we serve have grown, and our assets under management have grown significantly as a result as well.
And I think one of the things that really intrigued me, because and it was a very timely topic. So the last couple of episodes, we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship, mindset of an entrepreneur. We had even a consultant who's helped companies scale up to selling for north of 9 figures. So a lot of advisors always want to know, what are the breakthrough moments, or as we're doing planning for 2025. You mentioned to me there was one specific thing you did where all of a sudden you had some tremendous growth to the firm. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit about what was going on in y'all's business, and then what happened to help accelerate the growth for y'all's firm?
Yeah, so I mean, when we decided to launch this podcast, our podcast, the Mitlin Money Mindset, just a little over 4 years ago, my wife at that time was then fully integrated into our firm as our director of marketing, and she said to me, she said, we need to have like a tie-in question, a question we ask each of our guests to kind of bring it all together, and then kind of compare and contrast and get some like level set amongst the guests. And I said, okay, great, come up with a question, because I'm not that creative when it comes to that kind of stuff. And she thought on it for a couple of days, and she came to me. She's like, I got it. She's like, we're going to ask him, what did you do today that brought you joy? And that question, that tagline, if you will, has led us to record growth. And it's really impacted people. So it started with the podcast and asking guests that question, and they really enjoyed and leaned into the question, which was great. And by the responses, we started realizing we were onto something. And we started printing shirts with the quote on it, or the tagline. We also trademarked it, by the way, so we have that IP as part of our practice as well. And I found myself that people were looking at the shirt as I went through airports. I had a Disney cast member break character at one of the rides and basically blurted out to me as I was waiting there to get on the ride. She said, I ate a bag of Hershey Kisses. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm looking at my wife, I'm looking at my boys. I'm like, what the heck is she talking about? They're like, look at your shirt, dummy. And it said, what did you do today that brought you joy? I've had people take photos of it. So we made a conscious decision, business decision, to really lean into this concept around joy. I subsequently wrote my book, which is Financial Planning Made Personal. What did you do today that brought you joy? We've also created a joy journal, similar to like a gratitude journal, but writing
Hmm.
down what you're joyful for. And it's really resonated not only with our stakeholders, but the general public. And it's really led to record growth. Last year, we grew 24% net new assets
Wow.
last year, and we attribute a great deal of that success. And this year, we're on a similar path. We attribute a great deal of that success to leaning in and really, taking on this concept of joy as we speak and work with the families we serve.
So how important is that state? So that's your statement of purpose, I would assume, your vision
Mhm.
for the company. So like when you meet people outside of the podcast as well too. So I mean, your team, they can just tell you right off the bat. So that's the first thing they're hearing out of your staff's mouth.
Yeah, I mean, we have our initial consultation, if you will, with the family is what we call an "is there a fit" meeting, because we want to
Hmm.
make sure that not only are we a fit for them and have them understand that, but we also want to make sure they're a fit for us, and that the challenges and issues they have are things we're familiar with, and then we can help them work through. And through that presentation, when we meet with them, it's all integrated through joy. It's all about figuring out what those moments that they're looking to create bring them the most joy. Because I feel like a lot of advisors focus on the dollars and cents, and
Hmm.
that's important, don't get me wrong, but we just have a different viewpoint of that. We feel that it's not necessarily about the dollars and cents themselves, it's what those dollars and cents are going to be able to provide the family, and what are they going to be able to do, and what joyful things are they going to be able to do for their family, with their family, or as a result of accumulating the money. So we talk all encompassing around this concept of joy, and in those meetings with existing families as well as prospective new ones as well.
Or and so you mentioned, so you and your wife Denise, so y'all wanted to start a podcast. How long did it take you from wanting to actually executing? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was about a year. I wanted to make sure that I understood what I was getting involved with, because as you're probably aware, Matt Halloran, who I know you're familiar with as well, they talk about pod fade all the time, and how people start podcasts and then they fade out after maybe a dozen or so episodes. I don't remember what those statistics are. I'm sure he does, but I wanted to make sure that I had something that was sustainable. And
Hmm.
so I made sure that I put the research in and the equipment that I got, and made sure that when I released my first episode, I actually released five at the same time. So if people enjoyed the first one, they'd have other things to listen to right away. And one of the things we did switch up right away, even when we launched it, we were originally going to go every other week, and we came to the conclusion that we would benefit from going weekly. So from October of 2020 through January, we're every other week, and then January of 21, and ever since, we've been doing a weekly show since then.
Yeah, I think I saw a study earlier this year. I said on a recent podcast, so I'll butcher it now, but I think it was like back in 2020, the amount of podcasts that started in 2020, there's like an eighth of them that are actually still around today.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so it's incredible, and the fact that you're doing it weekly. So who's the? I mean, it's just basically life experience, or I mean, you've done 200 episodes. How often are you interviewing people, or how are you generating content today? What's different today than back when you first started?
Yeah, so when I was in that phase of discovering how and what I wanted the show to be, initially I thought it was going to be me and I'd talk about topics, occasionally flutter in a guest or two. And as I went to record the first episode, I walked out of the room and I said, there's no way I could do this every week or every other week, talking to myself for 20, 30 minutes. It just
Hmm.
wasn't me. So I quickly pivoted and I said, you know what, it's going to be a guest driven show. So we bring on guests, and we've been a guest show throughout. And I would say that our guests kind of fall into one of three categories. We either have entrepreneurs, and we talk about their entrepreneurial story and their venture. We also have athletes, which I think athletes and entertainers, which I think a lot of times their stories and their lives are very similar to that of an entrepreneur. And
Hmm.
then thirdly, as you mentioned in the outset about the 1.7 million for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we bring in a lot of mental health related guests and conversations. So it's just allowed me to have conversations with people that I ordinarily wouldn't have been able to talk to. And it's just amazing what, and how people earn a living and how their entrepreneurial brain works, and sharing that with the world.
Are you an advisor currently working in your business instead of on your business each and every day? You are not alone. We come across advisors every single day that are constantly asking us, what can I do to get better? How can I go from being an advisor to a CEO? How do I delegate? If you find yourself asking you these same type of questions in your business to your team, you're in the right place. Make sure to check out our resources here at www.insuremarkamp.com/Jeremy. You can hear from successful entrepreneurial advisors like yourself as they have plugged into our systems and processes and continued to scale their business. If you are an advisor that's looking to go from advisor to CEO, make sure to go to www.insuremarkamp.com/Jeremy. Click on the Learn More section, insert your information. We'd love to get our introduction kit to you. Now, back to this episode. If there was maybe your top two most memorable ones that impacted your life, and so here's the other thing, right? You got 200 episodes. So when someone meets you and they look at all that you have done, what's something that your team, is there like a go-to episode where you, not only for your audience, but maybe even yourself, you learned a whole lot that you always share with somebody out of those 200?
Yeah, so I'll say two things to that. One is, when we get approached by advisors all the time who are interested in how we're doing business and our story. So
Hmm.
one of the people we share very frequently, and he's one of the few guests that we've actually done two episodes with. He was our first episode and our 100th episode, and that's Ron Carson. Having him on the show has, and his insights are always helpful. So that's been utilized, and Burt White as well, who's the current CEO of Carson Group, another guy who's very well followed, well liked, and he had a great career with LPL and now with Carson Group. And then my second answer to that is we use it as a curated library, not only for advisors but the families we serve too. Right? If
Right.
we have a family that has a question about how do they become a Florida resident, perhaps, and for tax purposes, we had one of the top New York State tax attorneys as a guest. Right? If they have a question about estate planning, we've had some of the top estate planning attorneys as guests. We'll share that episode with them. So we use it as a tool to kind of reinforce some of those conversations. And it's good for them because it's not just always us sharing our ideas. We can give
Hmm.
some third party information that they usually find helpful as well.
I mean, I couldn't echo that enough. And also, you've removed yourself from having to say the same story over and over and over
Right.
again. Are you, so who is y'all's ideal customer, and walk us through a little bit about the mindset of figuring out who the right fit is for y'all's group? So 20 years of existence now, do y'all have an ideal avatar of who you work with?
Yeah, so we have an interesting avatar, if you will, and there's been debate as to how and what we should do to kind of niche it down because it's somewhat general. But in terms of the first and foremost is we want good people. We want people who we enjoy working with. We want people that have issues, concerns that we can help solve them, and basically, kind of from an avatar standpoint, we find that they fall in kind of two main categories. One is those younger folks who are approaching, what I call their busiest times of their life, meaning they're going to have kids, right? They're buying a house, they're worried about or concerned about their career. They don't have time a lot of times to do planning and worry about their investments and make sure the estate planning's in order, their insurance is in order. So that's where we come in and make sure that we're managing all of those areas of their financial life. And then at the same time, on the older end, as folks start approaching or entering retirement, they don't want to have to worry about these things either, because they want to do those things that bring them the most joy, which is either, playing golf or whatever their hobbies are, or spending time with their family, friends, traveling. And that's where we come in and help make sure that all these areas of their life are being addressed, that they're up to date. If they need to be updated, we can help them do that, and just managing their situation. So that's kind of it. I know that from a marketing standpoint, some would say that's a little too general, but it's one of those things that we've kind of refined it so well that when we see it, we know it. And when we don't see it, we know it also. So we know when it's a good fit, and perhaps when it's not either.
So for those advisors that are listening, and I think already a lot of good nuggets to take away from already this episode. And like I mentioned, the last 2 or 3 episodes, we've really put our flag in on business planning for 2025. So if you were sitting there at maybe a conference and you were chatting with an advisor, what are 3 tips for an advisor going into 2025 for their business if they're really looking to, let's say, 10x their growth over the next 5 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I was about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So I can share a couple of those things that I personally kind of wrote down, and that I'm updating and implementing as we speak. Right.
Hmm.
First and foremost, I think you have to really go through the exercise of figuring out what you have to do and what does not have to be done by you. And it's tough, right? Delegating. I think delegating has been one of the top paths for me for the growth that we've had. And it's not easy at times trying to give up that control and your hands in that. But, I just keep telling myself done is better than perfect. And I think you really have to incorporate that, and that who not how philosophy from Dan Sullivan, if you or your listeners are familiar with that.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Two is, if you need it, if you can't do it in house, and this is kind of where I was a couple 4 years ago, in terms of I was the compliance officer, I handled trading, I was doing a lot of these things. So along those lines of delegating, I chose 4+ years ago to align myself with Carson Group, and for me, that was a huge, uh, you know, growth engine for me, because in the lines of what I said, number one was I was able to offload a lot of things to them that I was doing. So it allowed me to offload those right away. And I think number three is, just understand who you serve, and, go out there and play in those markets, and make sure that you are in those areas that are best suited for you and your team. And I'd add one other thing, fourth thing, which is, the team, which I just said. I think having the right people in the right seats can really accelerate growth. So I think if you kind of start working towards those four things in 2025, it'll put you on a path to, 10xing over the next 5 years. And if you want to know why it's so important to 10x instead of 2x, read Dan Sullivan's book, because that'll give you a lot of food for thought. It's really a super read.
I couldn't agree more. Those are, yeah, the main two. We actually had Chad Willardson on a recent episode, and he was featured in the book of 10x, and he talked a lot about just entrepreneurship, but most importantly, one of the biggest takeaways from his episode. So I'd like to hear your feedback on it. Is just not being afraid to be out there. And I mean, obviously, you got a podcast, so social media content, is that something that you think is a if someone of an advisor who's hesitant of doing podcasting or even doing social media, have you seen growth due to that?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, again, my wife is our director of marketing, and about 5 years ago or so, I was hesitant to put myself out there on social media. For example, I was like, people don't want to see me going here or doing this, and she's like, they do. And I've told this story before. The thing that really sealed the deal for me was I said, we'll give it a shot. Let's see what happens over the next, 12 months, and let's see what happens. And we were going on a family vacation to South Africa the year before the COVID pandemic,
Hmm.
and we went to South Africa, and we documented the whole trip. Every day we posted something online, And the thing that sealed the deal for me, knowing that this was the right thing for us to do, is from a family we serve, a widow. She was homebound because of COPD. And she sent me an email saying, which I never knew this, that it was on her bucket list to go to South Africa and go on safari. But because of her medical conditions, it was something she was never going to be able to do. But because I posted every day, she felt as if she lived on that safari with us and got to experience it. And it was a very heartfelt email. And right then and there, I said to my wife, I was like, "You're right." And we just leaned in and doubled down. And right now we get anywhere between 2 to 4 inbound leads a week. And those many times come through our website, which is usually directly linked to either some social media channel, or through social media directly. We get a DM, "Hey, I have this going on. Can you help me out?" So it works, certainly.
Very impactful story. I don't think I heard that one. So, um, for the audience, so yes, that would be obviously an amazing thing to, all right, we need to lean in more to this. So was it, because I think a lot of people, at least in conversations around business planning, is not being able to make that leap. So I mean, was it basically your wife forcing you to do it? Or what, like what finally got you over the hump to decide, all right, I'm gonna start. And how do I start?
Yeah. She was very convincing in saying that she felt like this was the wave of the future and it was something that should be done. And, it's one of those things that I can't say it doesn't work if we haven't tried it. Right. So, and really just trying it in that instance and then having that feedback. And since that time, I've literally had families say that they log on to Facebook once a day or once a week just to even see what's going on with me and where I am. If they
Wow.
feel like they have that connection with us. And it's a really easy way. I know, like years ago, advisors used to send out like their year-end holiday letter giving the update of what happened with their family for the year. You don't have to do that anymore. You put it out there, and people feel connected when people come in now to meet with us for that first meeting. And I talk about this often as well. When I first started in the business and started the firm 20 years ago, it used to take 3, 4 appointments to, onboard or get a family to a point where they wanted to work with you. Now, typically, they're coming in the first meeting and they know that they, want to work with us. In some cases, they're like, we don't even have to talk about this. How do I transfer and get started with planning with you? And I'm like, no, we want you to understand how we work with families. But the point is, they're already at a point where they know us, they like us, and they trust us because they know so much about us before they even walk in the door. So, all those things together has just really led us to believe that that's the way we have to operate. And it's been super helpful. And I'm glad I listened to my wife, Denise, in that regard.
No, that's an incredible story. And I think one thing I did want to ask is, so the suicide prevention. So I'm kind of pivoting here. So I don't know the story. So what got y'all involved, and what's the story behind that? Like I said, 1.7 million raised is no joke.
Yeah,
So
thank
tell me
you.
a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I lost my brother-in-law in September of 2004. About my wife's brother died by suicide about a month before I was going to launch my firm, and we decided to move forward with it anyhow, and because we felt like that would be what he would want, and essentially it opened my eyes to mental health and the fact that people can die from anxiety, bipolar disorder. I never experienced somebody dying from something like that. And it was something that, my wife and I had talked about, and we made a conscious decision that we weren't going to let my brother-in-law go quietly. And 20 years ago or so, people were not as forthright, as transparent, talking about these topics as they are today. I still think we have a ways to go, but we're definitely better than where we were 20 years ago. So we felt by telling his story, we wanted to help others feel comfortable about either seeking help or telling their story. And as a result, along the way, we've had a number of different fundraisers. We've had a golf outing for 10 years. My wife runs a book fundraiser every May for Mental Health Awareness Month. And I've played in a 24-hour hockey game the last couple of years over Labor Day weekend to help raise funds. And we've raised about 1.7 million or so for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention through the Keith Milano Memorial Fund, which has been fantastic. But I also like sharing, more importantly than the money is my wife and I have become de facto resources for people in the community, people in our social networks, and people feel comfortable reaching out to us. We don't give medical advice. We just share experiential advice and guidance. And we know for a fact that we've helped save lives. And, that is something that 1.7 million, I'll give it away tomorrow to know that we could save a life. So it's been hugely impactful, and we haven't let my brother-in-law's name go away, and it still, lives today in such a positive way. It just brings us a lot of joy as a result.
Incredible story. So as thanks for sharing that. Is there, as we're wrapping up, anything you'd like to share with our listeners? Any words of wisdom?
Yeah, just listen. We have a short time here, and especially those that have young kids like you do, Jeremy. You'll learn, and hopefully not as late as I. Kids grow up quick. Being a math major, I use the term exponentially faster. It seems like as they get older, the time flies even faster. So as you're doing those business planning, make sure that you're taking into those concepts that I mentioned earlier, but also make sure that you're incorporating some family time in there and a whole lot of joy along the way.
Great advice. No, appreciate your time, Larry. Thank you also to the listener for tuning in to this week's episode of the Advisor Mentorship Podcast. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite listening device. Follow us on LinkedIn at Jeremy Hauser, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Jeremy Hauser Amp. And as you share this episode with a friend or a colleague, remember, in a world full of betas, be an alpha.